The night was dark and quiet. Alma stood at her small stall on the edge of town. She was not afraid. Every midnight, she came here to sell her warm, sweet buns. But her customers were not ordinary people. As the clock struck 12, a cold wind blew. Alma shivered, but she didn't run away. She knew what was coming. Slowly, white shapes began to appear in the darkness. They floated towards her stall, silent as shadows. These were the ghosts, Alma's nightly customers. They came from the old graveyard nearby. In life, they had loved Alma's buns. Now, even in death, they couldn't stay away from the delicious smell. Alma greeted each ghost with a smile. She wasn't scared of them. To her, they were just hungry souls who wanted a taste of the living world. She handed out buns, and the ghosts gave her strange, glowing coins in return. In a small village on the outskirts of a dense African forest, there lived a woman named Alma. She was known throughout the region for her delicious buns, golden brown and filled with sweet, spiced fruit. But Alma had a secret that set her apart from the other villagers. Every night, as the moon reached its peak, she would make her way to a small clearing at the edge of the nearby graveyard. Alma's day always began early. As the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, she would rise from her bed, yawning and stretching. Her small mud hut was simple but clean, with a thatched roof that kept out the rain. She would dress quickly in her colorful wrapper and head to her tiny kitchen. There, Alma would begin the long process of making her famous buns. She mixed flour, sugar, and spices in a large wooden bowl, her strong arms working the dough until it was smooth and elastic. Then she would carefully fold in the fruit, a secret mixture of local berries and exotic imports that she guarded jealously. As she worked, Alma hummed to herself, old songs her grandmother had taught her. The villagers passing by would hear her voice and shake their heads. They thought Alma was strange, maybe even touched in the head. After all, who else would choose to live so close to the graveyard? But Alma didn't mind their whispers and sidelong glances. She had found her purpose in life, even if others couldn't understand it. She continued to work throughout the day, shaping the dough into small round buns and letting them rise in the warm African sun. As evening approached, Alma would fire up her old clay oven. The smell of baking buns would fill the air, drawing curious glances from children playing nearby. But no one ever came to buy Alma's buns during the day. They were all too afraid of the strange woman who lived by the graveyard. As night fell, Alma would pack her freshly baked buns into a large basket. She covered them with a clean cloth to keep them warm. Then, as the village settled into sleep, Alma would begin her nightly journey. The path to the clearing was dark and overgrown, but Alma knew every root and stone by heart. She walked confidently, her basket balanced on her head, humming softly to herself. The night creatures watched her pass, but none dared to bother her. They knew she was under the protection of powers they couldn't understand. At the edge of the clearing, Alma had set up a small stall. It was nothing more than a wooden table and a stool, but it was all she needed. She arranged her buns carefully on the table, making sure each one was displayed to its best advantage. Then she sat down to wait. As the clock in the village square struck midnight, a cool wind began to blow. Alma shivered slightly but stood her ground. She knew what was coming. Slowly, white shapes began to materialize in the darkness. They floated towards her stall, silent as falling leaves. These were Alma's customers, the ghosts of the graveyard. In life, they had been villagers just like any others. Some had died young, others old. Some had been rich, others poor. But in death, they were all the same, lonely souls longing for a taste of the life they had left behind. Alma greeted each ghost with a warm smile and a nod. She wasn't afraid of them. To her, they were just hungry spirits who wanted to remember what it felt like to eat, to taste, to enjoy a simple pleasure. The first ghost to approach was an old man, his spectral form bent with age. In life, he had been the village elder, respected and admired. Now he came to Alma's stall every night, eager for a taste of her sweet buns. "Good evening, elder," Alma said softly. "The usual for you?" The ghost nodded, a wistful smile on his transparent face. Alma handed him a bun, and he gave her a glowing coin in return. The ghost money was useless in the world of the living, but Alma accepted it graciously. She knew it made the ghosts feel normal, like they were still part of the world they had left behind. As the night wore on, more ghosts came to Alma's stall. There was a young woman who had died in childbirth, still cradling an invisible baby in her arms. There was a soldier, his uniform still bearing the marks of the battle that had taken his life. There were children, old people, rich and poor, all of them drawn by the smell of Alma's buns and the promise of a moment's respite from their eternal rest. Alma served them all with kindness and patience. She listened to their whispered stories, even though their voices were like the rustling of leaves in the wind. She smiled at their jokes, even though she couldn't always hear the punchline. For a few hours each night, Alma's stall became a bridge between the world of the living and the world of the dead. As she worked, Alma thought about her life. She remembered how she had discovered her unusual talent. It had been on the night of her grandmother's funeral, many years ago. Unable to sleep, Alma had wandered to the graveyard, carrying some of the buns she had made for the wake. There, she had seen her first ghost, her grandmother, looking lost and confused. Without thinking, Alma had offered her grandmother a bun. To her surprise, the ghost had been able to take it, to eat it, to enjoy it. From that night on, Alma had known her purpose. She had set up her midnight stall, ready to serve the ghosts who came seeking a taste of life. The villagers thought she was mad, of course. They avoided her during the day, crossing to the other side of the road when they saw her coming. Children made up scary stories about her, daring each other to go near her hut. But Alma didn't mind. She had found her place in the world, even if it was a strange one. As the night went on, Alma's basket of buns got emptier, and her pocket got heavier with ghost money. She wondered, as she often did, what she would do with it. It wasn't like she could spend it in the village market. Sometimes, on quiet nights, she would use it to play games with the ghost children, teaching them to count and add. Finally, as the sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, the last ghost floated away. Alma packed up her stall and headed home. She was tired, but happy. She had helped the ghosts, and in their own way, they had helped her too. In this unusual midnight market, everyone got what they needed. As Alma walked home, she thought about the day ahead. She would sleep for a few hours, then start all over again. There would be dough to mix, buns to bake, and tonight, more ghosts to feed. It was a strange life, but it was hers, and she wouldn't have it any other way. The sun was just peeking over the horizon as Alma reached her hut. The villagers were beginning to stir, getting ready for another day. They saw Alma returning from the graveyard and quickly looked away, whispering among themselves. But Alma just smiled. Let them talk, she thought. She knew she was doing good work, even if they couldn't understand it. As she fell into bed, exhausted but content, Alma's last thought was of the ghosts. They would be waiting for her tonight, as they did every night. And she would be there, with her basket of warm, sweet buns, ready to give them a taste of the life they had left behind. As the years passed, Alma's nightly routine remained unchanged. But the world around her was slowly shifting, like sand in an hourglass. The small village began to grow, attracting newcomers from distant lands. With them came new ideas, new technologies, and new challenges for Alma and her unique business. One day, a young man named Kwesi arrived in the village. He was different from the others, curious, open-minded, and unafraid of the local superstitions. Kwesi had come to study the local flora for a university in the city, but he soon became intrigued by the whispered stories about the strange woman who lived near the graveyard. Kwesi began to watch Alma from afar. He noticed her daily routines, the delicious smells coming from her hut, and her mysterious nightly excursions. Unlike the other villagers, Kwesi didn't fear Alma. Instead, he was fascinated. One night, as Alma made her way to her midnight stall, Kwesi decided to follow her. He crept silently through the underbrush, careful not to alert Alma to his presence. As he reached the edge of the clearing, he couldn't believe his eyes. There was Alma, calmly handing out buns to a group of translucent figures. Ghosts. Real ghosts. Kwesi rubbed his eyes, certain he must be dreaming. But the scene before him didn't change. Overwhelmed by what he was seeing, Kwesi stumbled backward, snapping a twig under his foot. The sharp crack echoed through the clearing. Alma and the ghosts turned towards the sound, their eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, everything was still. Then Alma spoke. her voice calm but firm. "Come out, whoever you are. Don't be afraid." Trembling, Kwesi stepped into the clearing. The ghosts began to fade away, alarmed by the presence of a living intruder. But Alma held up her hand, and they paused, hovering uncertainly. "Who are you?" Alma asked, her eyes narrowing as she studied the young man. I'm Kwesi," he stammered. "I'm sorry for spying. I was just curious about the stories I'd heard." Alma considered him for a long moment. Then, to Kwesi's surprise, she smiled. "Well, Kwesi," she said, "since you're here, would you like a bun?" That night marked the beginning of a new chapter in Alma's life. Kwesi became a regular visitor to her midnight stall, fascinated by the ghosts and their stories. He helped Alma serve the buns, listening in wonder as the spirits shared tales of their past lives. As Kwesi spent more time with Alma, he began to understand the importance of her work. She wasn't just feeding the ghosts, she was helping them find peace, giving them a connection to the world they had left behind. But Kwesi also saw how isolated Alma had become from the living. The villagers still avoided her, their fear only growing as the village expanded. Kwesi decided to change that. He started by bringing some of his university colleagues to meet Alma. At first, they were skeptical, but Alma's warmth and the undeniable presence of the ghosts soon won them over. Word began to spread about the remarkable woman who could communicate with the dead. As news of Alma's gift reached the wider world, everything changed. Researchers and spiritualists flocked to the village, eager to witness the midnight feedings. Some came to study the phenomena, others to seek comfort and closure with their departed loved ones. The village elders, seeing the influx of visitors as an opportunity, decided to embrace Alma's uniqueness. They declared the village a spiritual sanctuary and began to build guest houses to accommodate the visitors. Alma found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. During the day, she spoke with researchers and comforted grieving families. At night, she continued her work with the ghosts, now aided by Kwesi and a small group of assistants. But as her fame grew, Alma faced new challenges. Some accused her of trickery, others of blasphemy. There were those who sought to exploit her gift for their own gain. Through it all, Alma remained true to her purpose, focusing on the needs of her ghostly customers. Kwesi stood by her side, helping to manage the growing demands on her time and energy. As they worked together, day after day and night after night, their friendship deepened into something more. Kwesi's love for Alma was as unique as she was, a blend of admiration, respect, and deep affection. Years passed, and Alma's midnight stall grew into a thriving enterprise. The once feared graveyard became a place of healing and hope, where the living and the dead could connect. Alma's buns, once shunned by the villagers, became famous throughout the region. But for Alma, the most important things remained unchanged. Every midnight, she would take a place at the stall, a warm smile on her face and a basket of fresh buns by her side. And every midnight, the ghosts would come, eager for a taste of her kindness and a moment of peace in their eternal journey. As Alma grew older, she began to think about her legacy. She started teaching others her special baking techniques and the delicate art of communicating with spirits. She knew that someday, she too would join the ranks of the ghosts. But she was determined that her work would continue, bridging the gap between the world of the living and the world beyond. And so, in a village that had once feared her, Alma became a legend. The woman who fed the ghosts, who brought comfort to the living and the dead alike. Her story was told and retold, growing with each telling, becoming a part of the fabric of the land itself. As for Alma, she continued her nightly vigil year after year, serving her spectral customers with the same love and dedication she had shown on that first fateful night so long ago. For in this most unusual of markets, she had found her true calling, a calling that transcended the boundaries of life and death itself.